A digital wave is sweeping over India. Traditional media streams are finding it extremely hard to keep up with the digital revolution that has seen the big global players throng towards the Indian market. With around 2 million paid digital consumers, India is one of the fastest growth markets in the world. And if a recent EY report is anything to go by, digital revenue growth in India is expected to outperform Bollywood by the year 2020. Now that's an interesting stat. So talk about this big digital surge in India and how best can all stakeholders involved ride this digital wave and perhaps, well, cash in on it. I'm joined by Nachiket Pantvaidya, CEO of ALTBalaji, and Ashish Pherwani, partner and head advisory media and entertainment at EY. Guys, thanks so much for joining us on Bloomberg Quint. Ashish, I'd like to start by asking you about this report that you guys have actually authored and asking you the key question. Is now the time for digital? And could we say that this is the digital tipping point for the M&E sector?
So I think we've been seeing and studying this industry for over 10 years now, and we've always been saying that the digital tipping point is going to come, but now we believe it's coming. And actually, we believe that by 2020, digital will be the third largest segment of the Indian M&E industry, and film itself across 20,000 crores. Not only that, but we see a CAGR of about 29 to 30% a year of how digital spends are growing, which is a clear reflection of how digital content is actually changing the way we consume our entertainment. We expect subscription to grow by about 50% as well, both on the back of large subscription packs, where we believe about 6 million people today who subscribe to one or more OTT subscription packs will grow to about 20 million by 2020, as well as the large 200 million base that's there in this country who will, with sachet pricing, start paying 5 rupees, 3 rupees, 10 rupees for pieces of content. And that base, we believe, will be a large part going forward as well in terms of digital subscription.
Right, Ashish, and I want to get into those numbers further in this conversation. But Nachiket, I wanted to understand from you, considering what you're doing at ALTBalaji and considering the amount of regional content that you guys are focusing on, when we're talking about the digital play, is regional content the way to go, considering this report's findings as well? Or is there even a market perhaps for English content and even Hindi content in a market like India?
So right now, our feeling is that it's a 15% English market, 85% non-English market right now. But in 5 years, this will probably be 5% and 95%. And the reason behind this is simply twofold. One is that there has been a geofication of the Indian digital industry, where internet is available at close to free prices for the mass of India to consume. And therefore, every Indian, whether he or she is 15 or 65, is suddenly engulfed by this digital wave. We are seeing the tipping point because it's not just one youth category that's tipping through, it's every age group that is. And therefore, our strategy at All Digital is centered around putting out content, for a diverse range of people who are watching it. So we've got slightly more evolved content like Bose. We've got our television stars going on to digital shows. We've got Ragini MMS, our horror franchise from movie that we have extended onto digital. And we feel that whatever we put out, it just gets lapped out or lapped up in the first 7 days so fast that we can almost feel the thirst for good original Indian content to be put out. The caveat here is, of course, that television continues to rule the roost as far as family targeted content goes, but as far as anybody who wants to watch content individually, it's going to be the mobile phone and the digital content that will rule the roost.
Interesting, Nachiket, and since you mentioned geofication, the next few minutes of this conversation will be dedicated to geofication on that note. But Nachiket, I want to bring you in there. Considering the entry of geo, and we're seeing more screens, cheaper data, perhaps over the years it's also going to mean higher speeds and perhaps better quality of broadband internet. Based on the report, this means that more time has been spent and more content has been consumed on digital media in India than ever before, right? So when it comes to, well, revenue streams, you're talking about digital advertising, and I think that's something Nachiket can weigh in on a little later as well. But when we talk about digital advertising growing in India as well, based on your report, by 2020, digital will overtake films as the third largest sector of the Indian M&E sector. That's something you were talking about earlier as well. But if we're talking about digital advertising growing, are we looking at a lot, perhaps a lot of advertisers looking at the digital segment a lot more seriously, perhaps because it offers this sort of targeted advertising as well?
I believe that the number of advertisers on digital has grown significantly over the past 3 years, and we expect to see it a lot more. However, the digital advertising model is still evolving, and there are several issues with it which need to be tackled. Most importantly, there's been a lot of instances where bots have been seen to be put in play to increase the amount of clicks and views, where the ad gets actually viewed on which part of the page and next to what piece of content. But having said all of that, I think these are issues which can be handled eventually. The main point really is that content consumption trends are changing, and more people are watching more content on digital. What's shown as 3 hours and 45 minutes today of TV content consumption, digital is not taking away from that, but digital is providing the second screen, and we expect that at a household level that 3 hours 45 minutes could go as high as 5 to 5.5 to even 6 hours per household. And that incremental time spent will largely come from digital. And therefore, digital has become too big in effect to fail. And therefore, the ad model will have to evolve and take into cognizance this and become something that works for advertisers as well as audiences as well as the media companies.
Ashish, but since you're talking about this particular subject, it becomes interesting because there's another finding in your survey that caught my eye, which was about subscription growth outpacing ad growth in 2017. There's a 15% increase in subscription revenues in the last year. Now that becomes interesting because we talk about wider implementation of cable TV digitalization, increased adoption of subscription of OTP platforms, or for example, the Hotstars, the Netflix and the Amazons, in-app purchases. Well, it's the freemium model perhaps seems to be working out here in India. And of course, add to this the payments push. We see what's happening with UPI. We see how digital payments are becoming a lot more pervasive, a lot more ubiquitous. I really want to understand from you whether the tables are turning when it comes to this subscription revenue model.
Oh, absolutely. I think subscription increased from 260 crores in calendar year 16 to 390 crores in calendar year 17. That's a 50% jump. And we expect it to grow much, much faster going forward on the back of the BHIM payments and micro payments, and actually top 2,000 crores by 2020. So it's a small base, but we've actually put our neck out on this one, and we believe this is going to be a huge, huge hockey stick that's going to happen starting 2018 and going on for the next 4 to 5 years.
Right, Nachiket, I want to get you in on this as well. When it comes to the content that you guys are actually putting out with ALTBalaji, and there's some very interesting shows that you guys are working with as well. Based on this report, there's this new customer segmentation that they're talking about, which is agnostic of perhaps geography, gender, and age, which is how it's been all this while. And it's essentially segmenting them into, the ability to pay. Now, I want to understand two things from you. One, in terms of the content that you guys are putting out, are these things that you consider? And two, also, whether this is going to become paid content in the future, based on my last question to Ashish, of course, because have you also been churning out content, looking at, perhaps the audience in a very different way, saying this is the way forward, customer segmentation has changed?
Yes, to answer your second question first, I think the biggest move that digital has done is that it has made the consumer addressable. Broadcasting would never have the addressability of its subscription revenues. There was this, big under-declaration that happened with cable operators, and, the broadcasters would get only 10% to 15% of the revenues that were actually collected from each home. Now you can actually collect at least 80% of the revenues that the consumer is paying for your content. So that's one big change that's going to be an even steeper hockey stick than probably Ashish's report says, is my conjecture. The second, of course, to your point, is that we believe that there is no elite digital content market in India that will exploit this huge digital wave. You have to make it mass, and the only difference is that you cannot make it for family, because that sanitized family content sits very well on television today, where about 4 people in the house are watching it together. So when you want to cater to that individual in the family, whether that person is from a town which is less than 1 lakh in population, or whether that person is from Mumbai, whether that person is from Kolaba or from Kandivali, that content has to cater to individual viewing. So for example, we've got content like Dev Double D, which is a classic Devdas, Sharat Chandra Chatterjee's Devdas, made in the 1890s, enacted by Dilip Kumar, watched by family, enacted by Shah Rukh Khan, watched by family. By Abhay Deol, it became a little more kind of edgy, and our Devika Double D with a woman protagonist is even more edgy, and it ensures that it can be watched only individually, and that's really the positioning of our content. This is mass individual content for the 600 to 700 million people in India who are going to have functional 4G now.
Very, very interesting insights there, Nachiket. Now, since you mentioned geofication earlier, I just want to understand how this works, considering we've seen Jio and Reliance's investments in the M&E space, be it Network 18, be it Balaji Telefilms, and be it now Eros now as well. And considering how, even Jio's OTT platforms are actually working, what I want to understand from you, Nachiket, is this is an era where the Amazons and the Netflix of the world are coming out with exclusives and originals. Considering, such varied investments in these groups, how do you guys manage to, carve out that identity, saying this is going to be an alt exclusive or an Eros exclusive? Is that going to be a little difficult, considering the integration and the consolidation in this space?
Well, I mean, I don't want to comment on the Reliance or the Jio side of things, but from the alt perspective, for us, what the telco market has done has opened up a whole new environment for us to create. As creators, we used to earlier create for television very, very successfully. We had a couple of successful films, but this huge bank of scripts that we had waiting to be done for the individual or the small screen were not yet exploited. So again, to answer your question, our basic motive is to scale up this content. Today, we've got about 18 shows on our app. In the next year, in the next 12 months to come, we'll end up having about 40 to 45 shows. And we feel that huge offering of content will ensure that this new internet audience that the telcos have opened up, at nearly at no price at all, samples our content. What it means is that we have to make our price points very affordable to our consumers. What does that mean? It means that consumers today, especially prepaid consumers on the telco base, can't afford to spend 600, 700 rupees. A prepaid recharge itself is only 100 rupees. So how do you make your content into small packets of 5 rupees, 7 rupees, 10 rupees that Ashish was talking about earlier? How do you in fact sachetize content consumption so that the consumer samples this? And I think the next 12 months is going to be an era of sampling. If the price points are really brought down to very convenient 2 rupee, 3 rupee price points, it is not inconceivable that 200 to 300 million people will actually sample OTT and get used to this.
Right, Nachiket. Ashish, I want to bring that point to you, because he's talking about content consumption, really. But when we're also talking about content creation and consumption, the question that I posed to Nachiket earlier was about one player perhaps investing in this space. I want to understand from you, from an industry perspective, is that a good thing for competition, considering what you've highlighted in the report for the coming years?
I think if you look at it, the entire Indian industry of media and entertainment has thrived on competition till today, right? Even if you look at print and television, these all have, there are 800 plus channels, there are 70,000 newspaper editions in this country, there are definitely more than 30 OTT platforms today. The good thing about all this is that the winner in this entire increased competitive scenario is always the customer. And I think when that's the focus of everybody to gain and service more and more customers, I think that's what causes the entire industry to grow. Having said that, yes, there are segments where the competition is extremely intense. And therefore, we do see a lot of mergers and acquisitions happening over the next 5 years. Consolidation is going to be required, and we've started to see a lot of it happen in the last 3 years. We expect to see even more happening over the next few years.
As these rates, data and broadband gets cheaper, and as, well, speeds get better, do you think cable or DTH companies should be worried about this digital onslaught?
No, I don't think cable and DTH companies need to worry because, as Nachiket was saying just now, the digital provides incremental content consumption, and the second screen of the home is now the mobile screen or the tablet screen rather than the television screen. And therefore, nothing to worry about for the traditional businesses in my mind. Having said that, what we've done a small study and what we believe in is that the kind of content consumption is moving more from group to individual. So back in 2015, 80% of content was consumed in groups. That's the living room of the house, for example. And 20% was consumed individually. That's the newspaper or something you do one-on-one. We believe that's going to change and become 50-50 by 2020. And therefore, the amount of overall content that will be consumed as a household unit will significantly go up to maybe from 3 hours, 45 minutes today to maybe 5.5, 6, even 6 hours by 2020. And that's the difference that digital will make.
But Nachiket, and there's another thing I wanted to ask you as well, which is an interesting point, considering we're talking about content and how the industry, the digital industry especially, entertainment has evolved. I want to get your thoughts on it. So when we talk about a Netflix or Amazon, and Ashish was talking about it a little earlier, saying let's look at it the way everyone abroad is looking at it. Talking about Kevin Spacey doing an exclusive show with a digital player, or even we're seeing so many things with Amazon originals as well. Do you see that sort of a movement happening over here as well? Are A-grade, A-listed stars looking at digital very seriously? I know Amazon's announced some tie-ups. I know Netflix has announced several tie-ups. We've watched some of those shows as well. But is it the same when it comes to Indian players, be it ALTBalaji, be it Voot, be it Hotstar? Are we seeing a similar sort of a movement here as well?
Well, there are two parts to the story. Of course, we have our Rajkumar Rao and Hansal Mehta show, and we've got a show with Nimrat Kaur already on air. So, we are already put it out there and it's doing extremely well for us. But our point is that we must understand the consumer first. And our content strategy from an alt point of view is to cater to multiple audiences within India itself. So, I think there are 2 or 3 rules that were applicable in the West that will not apply in India. And one of them is that Western world or developed countries have gone through a second screen development where there have been 2 TVs in the home, which is not going to happen in India. India, the second screen is straight going to be the mobile or the laptop or the pad or whatever you choose to watch it on internet. So that's an internet second screen that's going to come up. Second is, if you look at the US, there's always been a culture of pay channels like Showtime, HBO, which were deemed to do different kind of programming, at different from broadcast TV. And I think that culture is being replaced by the OTT platforms there. That culture never existed in India. There was a one-size-fits-all general entertainment channel model in India, and then that second Showtime, HBO culture is going to go straight onto OTT platforms. So in the sense, 2 rules that are not going to apply there is, one, this gradual development, and secondly, this second screen that's going to happen. The third and very major aspect is that Indians now for the past 20 years are not used to seasonal production. So the American or the European audiences are used to seeing seasons where there are 10 episodes or 15 episodes, and then they wait. In India, that's not happened simply. So the demand for volume is so high today that when we put out 20 episodes, say, of a show, people say that why did you stop at 20? Aren't you going to put out 100 of these? So I think the economics of production has to fulfill that consumer demand, where Indians are always, saying that please show me more and please show me more. And these 3 factors are going to define the way the supply side economic works. On the demand side, of course, the price points in India, as you know, have to be literally very low to evangelize any new service or product or offering. And therefore, I think the price points that ALTBalaji operates, which is less than ₹1 a day, is very conveniently placed to sampling. So you need to have close to free pricing for entry-level sampling when your libraries are growing, when you're in an evangelical phase of developing the industry. And I think all these 4 points put together, make it a much more pacier, much more high-growth market than any Western market has been today.
Nachiket, Ashish, thanks so much for joining us on Bloomberg Quinn. It's been a fascinating chat. Obviously, this was just a small chunk of the report. That's a massive 270-page report. But one thing is certain, digital is here to stay in India. Thanks so much for watching.